So, Supreet, I'm going to probably pass it to you to explain what we're doing while I go share it out with the link.
Okay. Oh, we're live. Yay. Okay, so hello, everybody. This is Supreet. I am here representing our Revolution King County, and we have Rhonda with us, who's representing our Revolution Washington Berniecrats Coalition. The goal today is to create a platform for the state of Washington, a progressive platform that we want candidates to sign on to. It'll be very closely aligned with Bernie's national platform with some Washington-specific laws. And to begin with, today our first topic is criminal justice reform. We'll have these meetings nearly every day. Some of the days we have other meetings, so the schedule is posted on Action Network. But every day we'll tackle two topics that are related, or sometimes they're not related. Today we picked criminal justice and racial justice reform. Today, I don't know why I'm repeating myself. And now we'll move to criminal justice reform. Let's start. To begin, before I pass on to Rhonda, we'll be going through Campaign Zero, which is a platform put forth by some Black Lives Matter activists and other activists in the community. The two platforms that really caught our eye were the one by Campaign Zero, and there's one by Movement for Black Lives. And we'll go through both those platforms and study them today. Go ahead, Rhonda.
All right, so go and bring it up to the top because I'm looking at your screen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the first one that we're going to hit on is the broken windows policing. It's end policing of the minor offenses. So following activities do not threaten public safety and are often used to police Black bodies, decriminalize these activities, or deprioritize their enforcement. So like consumption of alcohol in the streets, marijuana possession, disorderly conduct, trespassing, loitering, disturbing the peace, including loud music, spitting, jaywalking, bicycling on the sidewalks. So in essence, things that don't, affect anybody else's, safe spots, property or persons. Establish enforceable protections against
Profiling.
Sorry, this is small on my computer.
Oh, that's okay.
To prevent police from intervening in civilian lives for no reason other than the suspicion of their Blackness or other aspects of their identity. This should include immigration status, age, housing. If we're not talking, can we mute so it's not so loud for the audience, maybe? Oh, thank you. Okay, immigration status, age, housing status, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, HIV status, race, religion, and national origin as protected groups. The rights for people to seek court orders to stop police departments from profiling, bans on both intentional profiling and practices that have a disparate impact on protected groups.
Rhonda, maybe it would help if we just talk through it rather than reading through it. Because I can read better on my screen, so I'll just read my end and then we can just talk through it.
Yes, I shared it, so it'd be great. Yep.
Okay. So, and broken windows policing. You went through some of the acts that we want to be deprioritized in enforcement or decriminalized. All of them make complete sense. If anybody who's watching thinks we missed anything here, or Richard, Rhonda, if you think we missed anything here, is there any activity that we think? What else? I know there's some specifically affecting our houseless neighbors, but I don't know how to put it here. So I'd appreciate some input here.
Well, the most common offense against people without homes is what's called a camping ordinance in our local jurisdiction, where people are limited from putting up a tent during daylight hours. So they cannot have their tent up and visible during daylight hours, and that's constantly used as a harassment technique against our houseless neighbors.
Yep. God forbid our poverty is out in the open.
So we want to prevent things like sit-lie ordinances. We want to eliminate camping ordinances wherever possible. People have a right to exist whether they're housed or not.
Yep. Richard, would this be under national or a local platform? Just asking, so I know where to put this.
Oh.
Boy. If national were doing their job, we wouldn't have homeless people. So
I know, right?
Yeah. I don't know. Move on, and I will think about that.
Okay, let's figure out whether this is local or.
Is this where you might say something about other homelessness deterrents, like the lights and the bench bars and stuff?
So anything that from the policing aspect, anything that you think is minor offense and is just used to harass the marginalized. Sometimes it's people of color, sometimes it's poor people, sometimes it's people suffering from drug-related issues. So if there is anything you think that are minor offenses that are used to particularly target these communities, that's
smoking in public. I've actually met quite a few people who got in trouble for smoking in public, which they have to do fines for, which they don't have money for homeless and stuff like that.
Yep. I think we should discuss the smoking issue, which is certainly. I smoke, so it really bothers me that's an issue. But I also understand why that's allowed. But this is something we should have a discussion on, I think.
Right.
Public urination, but I'm not sure if I want that to be legal. That leads me to say, like, a Bill of Rights would include that there be public hygiene facilities.
Yep. I wonder if that is something that is generally used to. I think we are missing some perspectives here.
Agreed.
Right. Okay. Let's talk. Let's include that too.
Well, looking at it from another perspective, the idea here is to establish a platform and goals for our legislators to follow. Then it would make sense that we would support legislative work that establishes adequate public restrooms throughout the state.
Yep. And when I don't know what bucket it would exactly come under, so if it makes sense here, I'll be happy to write it down here. But I would think it would come either under infrastructure or under under infrastructure and utilities, or when we're talking about housing and homelessness.
Well, I'll make a note. We can bring it in later.
Yep. I put this.
One thing that affects that kind of fits in with the broken windows policing is for-profit prisons. I don't know at this time if there are for-profit prisons in the state, but it would be valuable, if not, to have, if so, it would be valuable to have a total ban on for-profit prisons within the state borders.
Absolutely. I'm actually going to write that down here.
And we do have for-profit prisons. We have an ICE detention center.
We have a detention center here, which is for.
Yeah, and I don't know if, as a state, if we have any control over the imposition of a federally operated for-profit prison within the state borders. That's a tough one.
Yeah. So we'll have to have this on both national and state platform. Complete ban on any private prisons within state borders. Don't know how we'd implement that, but we need to talk about that. This is on state and national.
There's one more, if I may, and that is that locally, at least in in the city of Vancouver, there is an entity called the Chiefs Diversity Action Team, which is operated by the Chief of Police in Vancouver, which is a committee of people representing local organizations like NAACP, LULAC, the Sikh community, et cetera, where everyone gets together once a month and talks about making sure that policing is colorblind, is equally enforced across the board, that no one is disadvantaged because of race, religion, etc.
Yep, there is the Campaign Zero platform has something specific for profiling, which is right here. Establish enforceable protections, that enforceable being the key word here, against profiling to prevent police from intervening in civilian lives for no reason other than suspicion of their blackness or other aspects of their identity. And the protected groups that Campaign Zero have listed are immigration status, age, housing status, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, HIV status, race, religion, and national origin. Is anything missing here?
Not that I can see. That
Me
looks
neither.
all encompassing.
Yep, it's all encompassing. The right for people to seek court orders to stop police departments from profiling. Visibility is not, but disability is. Yep. Bans on both intentional profiling and practices that have disparate impact on protected groups. Ban stops for furtive movements such as reaching for waistband or acting nervous, which is increasingly used as an excuse to shoot young black men. Ban stops for being in a high crime area, such as that criminalizes being in certain neighborhoods, especially poor and majority of color. Ban stops for matching a generalized description of a suspect, like, perfectly makes sense. Require officers to establish objective justification for making a stop, and this should be enforceable somehow. Require them to establish objective justification, but how do you challenge them back? Whether force was used with somebody. Can somebody help me with the language here? I want this part to be enforceable, like somehow people who are aggrieved should have a course of action.
Well, it's interesting because you're reading down this whole list, and that entire list is encompassed in Fourth Amendment rights of the federal Constitution.
I know, right?
So that if you just say that we as a state require all policing agencies to adhere strictly to the Fourth Amendment rights under the federal Constitution, that should cover it, really.
Yep, but here's the thing, Fourth Amendment exists already, so it just enumerates the rights. You still need legislation to enforce that, and that's what we're trying to do. Like, what should this how can we make this stronger? Yeah, it does require, what if somebody's Fourth Amendment's rights are breached, for example? There should be an easy way to complain, some citizens oversight, or something where you should be able to complain. I'll make a note of that. How to address if violated. Would you hold on a second?
Now you interrupted the meeting.
And the use of predictive policing technologies, and profiling. All of this needs to, we need to have a way to address them if violated. Prohibit police departments from using resource to investigate. Good. Yep. Establish alternative approaches to mental health crises. A multidisciplinary co-responder team that includes mental health professionals, social workers, and crisis counselors. Good. Involvement of this multidisciplinary team in planning, implementation, and responses to crises. At least 40 hours of crisis intervention training for police officers. All right. Next is community oversight, the second part of their platform. It includes establishing effective civilian oversight structures with enumeration for what the police commission should do, determine policy for police department based on community input, share policy and policy changes in publicly accessible formats, discipline and dismiss police officers, hold public disciplinary hearings, and so on and so forth. If anybody who's watching wants to go into the details of this, this is there on Campaign Zero's website, their entire platform. And the second thing that they have under community oversight is remove barriers to reporting police misconduct. For all stops by police officers, require them to give civilians their name, badge number, reason for stop, and a card with instructions for filing a complaint for civilian oversight. I love that. Limit use of force, establish standards and reporting of police use of deadly force, revise and strengthen local police departments' use of force policies, and traffic-related police killings and dangerous high-speed police chases, monitor how police use force and proactively hold officers accountable for excessive force. Again, if anybody in the audience knows about Campaign Zero and think there's something missing in this platform, please let us know. You can reach out to us at washingtonberniecrats@gmail.com, and your input would be highly valuable, especially if you belong to the affected community or have been an activist for quite some time. The fourth category we have is independently investigate and prosecute, lower standards of proof for Department of Justice civil rights investigation, use federal funds to encourage independent investigation and prosecution, establish a permanent special prosecutor's office at state level for cases of police violence, require independent investigation of all cases where police kill or seriously injure civilians. Community representation, increase the number of police officers who reflect the communities they serve. We need to end this practice of people coming from the outside the community and policing the community there. Use community feedback to inform police department policies and practices. The sixth category bucket that they have is body cams and film the police. Invest in rigorous and sustained training. Intentionally consider unconscious or implicit racial bias. I think I messed up here. This is not body cams. Let me move it down. Yep, I mixed up training and body cams. Just move it up. So training is invest in rigorous and sustained training and intentionally consider unconscious or implicit racial bias and train for that. The seventh one is body cams and film the police. Require the use of body cameras, dashboard cameras, include disciplinary matrix, clearly defining consequences for officers who fail to adhere to agencies' policies on body cameras, and the right to record police. We have seen over and over that people get arrested for recording the police. That needs to end. And for profit policing and police department quotas for tickets and arrests, which often leads to police officers going in poorer and Black neighborhoods to just meet their quotas. Limit fines and fees on low-income people. Prevent police, because this essentially, fines and fees on low-income people essentially criminalizes poverty. Prevent police from taking the money or property of innocent people, and require police departments to bear the cost of misconduct and not the citizens' money. Then next is demilitarization and federal government's 1033 program providing military weaponry to local police departments. Establish local restrictions to prevent police departments from purchasing or using military weaponry. And the last one is fair police union contracts. Remove barriers to effective misconduct investigation and civilian oversight. It does not make sense that police just get away with whatever they want to do because they are not subject to fair prosecution at times. Keep officers' disciplinary history accessible to police departments and public. Officers should not be able to commit a crime, get fired, and then get hired in another police department. And ensure financial accountability for officers in police departments that kill or seriously injure civilians. And that's what we have from Campaign Zero. But there is also another platform, which is Movement for Black Lives. And we also endorse their platform. I highly encourage everybody in our audience to go look at that platform. I'm gonna try and find it. Movement for Black Lives. Yep, we also endorse their entire platform. I'd highly encourage everybody to go look there. If again you have any questions, want to add anything, let us know. You can email us at washingtonberniecrats@gmail.com. Now let's move on to racial justice. On racial justice, we basically completely agree with Bernie Sanders. He has a comprehensive platform of physical violence, political violence, legal violence, economic violence, environmental violence against people of color, and he has comprehensive platform policy positions to address each of these categories. Starting with physical violence, I will not go into it completely, but this includes some of criminal justice reform. Political violence includes disenfranchisement of African American communities, closing of polling booths across the country, and requirement of voter identity cards. This addresses that. Legal violence is how our legal system and the criminal justice system criminalizes blackness and poverty. And Bernie again has a very comprehensive platform addressing legal violence, ban on for-profit prisons, end war on drugs, take marijuana off federal government list of outlawed drugs. We need to allow people in states to legalize marijuana, invest in drug courts and medical and mental health and intervention. Again, encourage everybody to go look there and let me know if anything is missing that you think should be here. Economic violence addresses the fact that African Americans have been systemically and historically oppressed, starting from slavery for 250 years, 150 years to, or was it 250 years? Forgive me, sorry. To another 85 years of Jim Crow, and it's just been 50 years since we have become apparently a post-racial society, but we know that's not what the facts are. So we need to address the economic disparity that exists in communities of color and white communities. And that includes need to give our children a fair shot at attending college, invest $5.5 billion to create 1 million jobs for disadvantaged. That's my laundry going, sorry. Increase the minimum wage to a livable wage. $15 is a start, but this is where we disagree with Bernie a little bit. We'd like it to be a little bit higher, and depending on where people live, it could be anywhere between $20 to $25. If minimum wage had just kept up with inflation, productivity, it would be $21 an hour right now from 1970s. So we need to realize that stuff has gotten costlier. American workers are more productive than ever, and they need to be able to enjoy the fruits of what they have produced. Next, invest $1 trillion to put 13 million Americans to work, rebuilding our crumbling cities, roads, bridges. Actually just create a federal jobs bill, and I would, in addition to what Bernie has, I would like to add public childcare and municipal internet. We need to invest in our infrastructure. At local level, we like to have public childcare and municipal internet and put people to work while providing a service to the community. Must pass federal legislation to ensure pay equity for women, prevent employers from discriminating based on criminal history. Pepsi was actually sued for asking for criminal history, and the way our criminal justice system works right now, blackness and poverty is again criminalized, so it ends up discriminating against those communities. Lastly, environmental justice. As we know, environmental problems, climate change, most affect poor people and people of color. So we have to address this fast. In Florida, when the hurricane happened, the rich will have enough money to build their own homes, and the lands of the poor just get snatched up by disaster capitalists who are waiting for another disaster to happen so they can snatch up public lands and privatize public industries. We need to stop that, recognize that it's these communities that are affected the most, and start addressing this issue. So to mitigate climate change. Bernie has equal enforcement of environmental, civil rights, and public health laws, address inadequate environmental cleanup efforts. Right now, we privatize the gains and socialize the losses. So if anything goes wrong, if they ruin our public lands, if they ruin our drinking water, we have to pay to fix it. But while they are using that energy, making that money, they get to keep all the profits. That's not capitalism by any means, even though I'm not a capitalist. Like, that doesn't even make sense. Federal agencies must develop and implement clear strategic plans to achieve climate and environmental justice. In addition to what Bernie has here, I think all of this can be summed up in one point by adding, we support a new Green New Deal. Support the Green New Deal. And we wanted, again, an aggressive transition away from fossil fuels with training for people who currently work in these areas, in these industries. So we don't want the workers to be hurt. We want to make sure that they still have jobs, and that's the only people we need to keep in mind. So while we are transitioning, we need to make sure we have plans in place to make sure people will be able to move on to similar or even better kinds of jobs, whether it's in the energy industry or outside that. And again, to end, we also endorse movement for Black Lives Platform. And in which they have freedom, justice, and safety for Black, Indigenous, and all women, femmes, and girls of color, and end to criminalization of Black, Indigenous, and all communities of color. And there's platform positions under all of these. I'd highly recommend that you go check it out. It's m4rj.com/platform. That's M for monkey, 4, numerical 4, R for rain, J for, I don't know, jug.com. All right. And that's what we have on criminal justice reform and racial justice reform. Does anybody have any questions, or is there anything they'd like to add? Did I miss anything? Any platform you'd like us to check? Now's the time to comment.
I think it might have been touched on a little bit in that last bit, but it was pointed out recently that Indigenous people of Canada can travel across the border with little to no hassle from Canada to the U.S., but it's not the same at the southern border. So I want equal protection under the law for that.
1 second, let's see. Let's see if it's here. I don't think it is, but I'll make a note. And if we can't address it today, we'll address it in our immigration and free movement.
And there is a Native American one too. So.
We also have empowering tribal nations, so we can also discuss it there. But to just go through this section, the M4RJ fully supports the March for Black Women platform and the demand to end all forms of violence, abuse, and injustices inflicted on Black women. This includes, but is not limited to, sexual violence and reproductive violations that target Black women. As we know, I don't know if everybody knows in the audience, but I hope they do, birth control pills were built were developed by illegal experimentation on Puerto Rican women. A lot of Puerto Rican women were illegally sterilized, and experiments were performed on them so that we here in the mainland could have the choice. So we have to be cognizant of the past and realize going forward that this should never happen again. None of our sisters should be sacrificed for the independence of others. It's all of us or it's none of us. We demand an end to all forms of violence. We demand civil rights protections for trans women and an end to ongoing discrimination that affects trans women's ability to seek adequate health care, housing, and employment. Trans women have right to quality life and freedom from assault. This, I think, is more encompassing and includes freedom and justice at every level, not just criminal justice reform. And I think we should cover this again, this part, especially when we go into women's rights, because trans women are women. And I think this should be covered then too, just to keep in mind. And about your thing that you commented, Courtney, let me make a note of that. Where's my, oops. Okay. free movement. This should be under racial justice. Yep. Free movement of all right. Anything else? All right. Today's stream would be was live, and video will be you will be able to find this video on YouTube on our channel, Washington Berniecrats Coalition, and it'll also be on our Facebook page, Our Revolution Washington Berniecrats Coalition. Please feel free to go through it if you missed some part of it. And again, if you have questions, right now we are just going through platforms that exist out there, and the whole point of having this meeting is to bring in as many voices as possible so you can critique these platforms, see if there's anything missing. If you missed this, please get back to us at washingtonberniecrats@gmail.com. And thank you.
Thank you. Not all of it did get recorded.
That's fine.
I was on kind of crashed, but the next one I'll have it set up on my main computer and use this as just a logging in and out of.
Alrighty. So we should, because not all of this was recorded, we should, once we write this down a bit better, consolidate it and send it out to local racial justice groups and advocacy groups and socialist groups.
Yes. So we can send them, this link, of course, to this video, Facebook video. And if you can download it from here, and if so, we will get it uploaded.
Yeah. All right, that's all we had for you today. Please join us next time, our next event. Let me look it up.
It's Thursday. So Tuesday we have our meeting, our general democracy meeting.
Yep.
And we'll be talking with other local Berniecrats groups. So we encourage any Washington local Berniecrats groups to join in, and our revolution groups as well.
Yep, and our next meeting is on women's rights and LGBTQ rights. If you know anybody who is passionate about these issues, who has a history of advocacy and activism in women's rights and LGBTQ rights, please direct them to us, message us on our Facebook page or again on our email, and we'll connect with them. And that's all we had for you today. See you on February 15th at 7 p.m.
Is there, pardon me, this is Richard. Will there be a section on disabilities issues rights?
Yep, that is
Yes.
Healthcare and disabilities it doesn't show up here, but I think it's on 27th, right, Rhonda? It's on Friday.
Yeah, and I'm going to send you the full list, Richard.
Yeah.
I got your
Good, thank you.
So I'm going to the full list because I think that you'll be interested in actually just about all that's on there. So.
Yep. And that's all we have. If you know candidates who are running and claiming to be progressive, please direct them to this platform and these meetings. Let's see if they can walk the walk too. And we'll see you next time. Have a good day.
Right.
Thank
you guys.
How do you stop live, Rhonda?
I'm working on it here.
Okay.